Before he even realized he was moving, his chair clattered to the floor behind him in his haste. His eyes were fixed on that tattoo with an intensity that bordered on religious revelation. His mind was racing through memories and possibilities with the speed of automatic weapons fire. Every detail he could see confirmed what his heart had been telling him for the past 2 hours. The way she moved, the careful control, the specific design of that unit insignia that couldn't be faked because he'd worn the same one. His hands shook as he reached into his jacket pocket, fingertips brushing against the photograph he'd carried for 18 years, like a talisman against forgetting. The moment crystallized around him, past and present, colliding with the force of an IED explosion, and suddenly he could smell cordite and burning fuel, mixed with the mundane scents of coffee and bacon grease. But what made this quiet customer suddenly jump to his feet? What connection existed between a construction worker's cruel games and a veteran's shocked recognition? If you've ever served in the military, you already know what's about to happen. Daniel's approach was that of a man walking through a dream, each step careful and deliberate, as if the floor might give way beneath him at any moment. His eyes remained locked on the tattoo, on the familiar insignia that had marked his own skin once upon a time, before shrapnel and surgeries had erased it, along with so much else. The coffee cup in his hand clattered against a table as he passed, the sound sharp in the preternatural quiet that had descended over Mel's diner. "3rd Infantry," he responded, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying clearly in the silence. 3rd Infantry, his voice cracked on the words. Years of searching and wondering condensed into this single moment of recognition. No, it can't be. After all this time, it just can't be. He stopped 3FT from Emily, close enough to see the way her eyes had gone wide with something between fear and recognition, far enough to give her space to run if she chose to. The examination on Daniel's face was intense and methodical, the kind of scrutiny that came from years of assessing threats and allies in split-second decisions. His gaze traveled from the tattoo to her face, searching for familiarity and features that time and trauma had altered, but not erased. "Could you be?" The question hung between them like a bridge across 18 years of separation. Ramani, summer of 2006. Each word was carefully chosen, a password to a shared experience that only 2 people in that diner could fully understand. Emily's reaction was immediate and visceral, her body tensing as if preparing for impact, her eyes darting to the exits like a trapped animal seeking escape routes. But there was something else there, too. A flicker of recognition that she couldn't quite hide despite years of practice at concealing her emotions. "Oh my God," Daniel breathed. And now his voice carried the weight of certainty, of puzzle pieces clicking into place with audible finality. "Sergeant Miller." "Emily Miller." The names fell from his lips like a prayer answered after years of doubt. His hands moved unconsciously to his chest, fingers tracing the outline of scars hidden beneath his shirt. Scars that matched hers in their origin, if not their severity. "You're the one. You're the one who pulled me out of that burning Humvee." The statement wasn't a question but a declaration, a truth so profound that it seemed to alter the very air in the diner. "I've been sitting here for 2 hours because I thought I was seeing ghosts. I've been carrying your picture for 18 years, searching every VA hospital, every veterans gathering, and every online forum, and here you are, serving coffee in a diner in the middle of nowhere." Emily's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. The tray in her hands crashed to the floor with a sound like artillery in the quiet space. Cups shattered, silverware scattered, and coffee spread across the linoleum in a dark pool that nobody moved to clean. She stumbled backward, her hand reaching for the counter to steady herself as her legs threatened to give way. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in denial of what her eyes were telling her. "You're supposed to be. They told me you didn't make it. They said the injuries were too severe, that you died in Germany." Her voice broke on the last word. Years of guilt and grief poured through the cracks in her professional facade. "I thought I failed you. All these years I thought I failed to save you." Tears tracked down her cheeks unchecked, each one a testament to nights spent reliving those moments, wondering if she could have done more, moved faster, been better. The revelation rippled through the diner like a shockwave, affecting each person differently but profoundly. Brian's laughter died in his throat, his crooked grin fading as even his limited intelligence began to grasp that something significant was happening, something that relegated his petty cruelties to the insignificance they deserved. His crew exchanged uncertain glances, their earlier bravado evaporating in the face of genuine emotion and history that dwarfed their small-minded games. The elderly couple at table 3 clutched each other's hands, the woman's eyes bright with unshed tears as she whispered something about their own son who had served. The college student had lowered his phone. The urge to record seemed forgotten in the face of something too profound for social media. Even the cook had emerged fully from the kitchen, his bulk filling the doorway as he watched the scene unfold with the attention of someone witnessing a historic event. "Alive," Daniel confirmed, his voice stronger now, filled with the kind of emotion that comes from gratitude so deep it has no adequate expression. "Because of you, you ran into hell itself to pull me out. When everyone else was running away from the fire, you ran toward it." He took a step closer, his movements careful and non-threatening, aware that he was approaching someone who had been living with invisible wounds for nearly 2 decades. "They told me a female soldier saved my life, but in the chaos afterward, I lost track. They shipped me to Germany, then Walter Reed. Months of surgeries and recovery. By the time I could ask questions, you had already left. They said you'd been discharged, disappeared into civilian life." His hand went to his pocket, pulling out the photograph with reverent care. "This is all I had. This picture is from before that night, and the memory of someone refusing to leave me behind." Emily's gaze fixed on the photograph, her breath catching as she recognized faces from another lifetime. Young soldiers grinning at the camera with the confidence of those who hadn't yet learned the true cost of war. Her finger traced the air above one face in particular, a young man whose features bore enough resemblance to the one standing before her to confirm what her heart already knew. "Rodriguez didn't make it," she replied quietly, naming another face in the photo. "Neither did Thompson. I tried. God, I tried to get everyone out, but the second I eat..." Her voice cracked, unable to finish the sentence that had haunted her dreams for 18 years. The weight of survivor's guilt was evident in every line of her body. The burden of being the one who lived when others didn't. The curse of memory that never faded, no matter how many coffee cups she filled or tables she cleaned. The atmosphere in the diner had transformed completely, the very air seeming to thicken with the weight of shared history and unspoken sacrifice. Customers who had entered seeking nothing more than breakfast and coffee found themselves witnesses to something far more profound. A reunion that spoke to the bonds forged in combat, the debts that could never be repaid, and the healing that sometimes comes from simply knowing that your sacrifice mattered. The morning sun streaming through the windows seemed to spotlight the 2 veterans, casting long shadows that stretched across the floor like bridges between past and present. In that moment, Mel's Diner had become something more than a roadside restaurant. It had become a place where hidden heroism was revealed, and where the true cost of freedom was written in scars both visible and invisible. How did a simple waitress save a soldier's life in Iraq? The answer was beginning to unfold for everyone present. But before you skip ahead, trust me, Brian's about to get what's coming. Brian Cooper's face had undergone a transformation from smug superiority to confusion, and then to something approaching desperation as he sensed the shift in the room's dynamics. Like a predator, it suddenly realized it had wandered into the territory of something far more dangerous than itself. Unable to accept that his position as the morning's entertainment director had been usurped by something genuine and profound, he doubled down on his cruelty with the blind persistence of a man who had never learned when to retreat, who had been raised to believe that backing down was weakness and kindness was for losers. His voice took on a whining quality that made him sound even more pathetic than before, like a playground bully suddenly confronted by adults who weren't impressed by his posturing. "Oh, come on," he scoffed, gesturing wildly at the scene before him as if he could wave away the emotion like smoke. "Don't fall for this act. She probably just peeled potatoes in some military kitchen if she served at all. Look at her." He pointed at Emily with a shaking finger, his movements becoming more agitated as he felt his audience slipping away from his control. "She's no hero, just a scarred-up nobody trying to get sympathy with a fake story about Iraq and burning vehicles and whatever else she's selling." The words tumbled out faster now, as if volume and speed could somehow restore his dominance over the situation he had so thoroughly misjudged. Each sentence digs him deeper into a hole he didn't even realize he was creating for himself. "I've seen this con before. People are buying military surplus gear at Goodwill and pretending they're heroes to get free meals and discounts. Stolen valor is what it's called, and it's disgusting. It's an insult to real veterans who actually served. Not like this waitress who probably got those scars from a grease fire or a domestic situation gone wrong." He turned to his crew for support but found them edging away. their faces showing the dawning recognition that their leader had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, said things that couldn't be unsaid. Even they, not the brightest bulbs in the box, could sense that something fundamental had shifted in the diner's atmosphere, that they were no longer in safe territory, where their usual behavior would be tolerated or ignored. The effect of Brian's words was immediate, but not what he had intended. Like throwing gasoline on a fire he thought was dying, only to watch it explode into an inferno that would consume him. Where before there had been uncomfortable silence in the face of his bullying, now there was a palpable anger building among the diner's patrons. The kind of collective rage that came from witnessing someone attack what they had just learned was sacred. The older man at table 3 was now fully on his feet, his wife no longer restraining him. His weathered face was set in lines of disgust, revealing someone who had seen real valor and recognized its opposite when confronted with it. "You ignorant little—" Anna, he responded, his voice shaking not with age but with fury. "I served in Vietnam and I know a real soldier when I see one. Sit down and shut your mouth before you make this worse for yourself." But Brian was beyond reasoning, beyond the ability to read the room or recognize the danger he was in, trapped in his own narrative of superiority that was crumbling around him like a sandcastle before a tsunami. It was Daniel Kelly's reaction that would prove most devastating. His face cycling through emotions from disbelief to rage to something colder and more controlled. The expression of a soldier who had learned to channel anger into purposeful action, who had been trained to use words as weapons when violence wasn't an option. He turned away from Emily slowly, deliberately, each movement calculated to draw attention and hold it, transforming himself from desperate searcher to avenging angel in the space between heartbeats. "Peel the potatoes." The words exploded through the diner with the force of a battlefield command, causing several people to flinch involuntarily, coffee cups rattling on tables from the sheer power of his void. "You dare to stand there in your comfortable life with your intact body and your ignorant assumptions and question her service. You want to know who she is? You want to know about the woman you've been mocking and humiliating for the sin of bearing scars that tell a story your small mind couldn't begin to comprehend?" Daniel paused, letting the questions hang in the air with the weight of incoming artillery. His eyes scanned the assembled crowd to ensure he had their complete attention before he began the demolition of Brian Cooper that would be talked about in this town for years to come. July 15, 2006. Ramani, Iraq, 120 the Grun in the shade. Except there was no shade in that hellhole. Just sun and sand and death waiting around every corner. His voice dropped lower, forcing everyone to lean in to catch every word. A storyteller's trick that commanded absolute attention while building tension like a tightening spring. Our convoy was returning from patrol. Routine, we thought. The kind of mission we'd done 100 times before. 3 Humvees, 12 soldiers, everyone tired, and thinking about getting back to base for what passed for dinner in that place. Then the world exploded. He paused again, his eyes distant now, seeing not the diner but a dusty road half a world away, reliving moments that had been seared into his memory with the kind of clarity that only trauma provides. The ID hit the lead vehicle, my vehicle, with enough force to flip a 9,000 LB armored Humvee like it was a toy. Rodriguez was driving. Daniel's voice caught on the name, humanizing the statistics of war. A good kid from El Paso, 22 years old, had a girlfriend back home. He was going to propose to her when we got back. The blast killed him instantly. At least that's what we told ourselves, because the alternative that he suffered in those flames was unbearable to consider. Thompson was unconscious, bleeding from a head wound that looked survivable if we could get him help fast enough. And me? His hand went unconsciously to his chest again, fingers tracing scars through his shirt. I was trapped. The blast had twisted the doorframe like a pretzel, jamming it shut, and fire was already spreading from the ruptured fuel tank, eating its way through the vehicle's interior like a living thing hungry for human flesh. "Have you ever seen a vehicle burn from the inside?" Daniel asked, directing the question at Brian but speaking to everyone, painting a picture so vivid that several people unconsciously moved as if they were feeling heat themselves. "Have you ever felt your skin beginning to blister while you're still conscious? Still aware that you're about to burn alive? Still able to smell your own flesh cooking? Have you ever known with absolute certainty that you're going to die badly, and there's nothing you can do about it except scream and pray for it to be quick?" The questions weren't rhetorical. They were weapons aimed at Brian's conscience, assuming he had one, designed to shatter his comfortable ignorance with the brutal reality of what he had mocked. That's when she appeared. Sergeant Emily Miller, our unit's medic, was supposed to stay back with the wounded from the other vehicles. Still, she never could follow that particular order when her people were in danger. Daniel's voice had taken on a rhythmic quality like a prayer or a battle hymn. Each word was carefully chosen to build the narrative toward its inevitable climax, weaving a story that transformed Emily from an anonymous waitress to a mythic hero before their eyes. She ran into those flames. No hesitation, no consideration for her own safety, no thought except that one of her soldiers needed help. She had nothing but her bare hands and a combat knife to break through the window. Her medical supplies were useless against the immediate threat of fire. Just determination that I've never seen matched before or since in all my years of service. He looked directly at Brian. Now his gaze pierces through the man's bravado like a laser through paper. He pulled me out first, dragging 200 lb of soldier and gear through a window that seemed impossibly small, the flames licking at her uniform, her exposed skin already blistering from the heat. But she didn't stop. She went back for Thompson, even though anyone with functioning eyes could see the fire had spread too far. Even though the ammunition was starting to cook off from the heat, sending rounds in every direction like deadly fireworks. That's when the second IED detonated. Daniel continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, forcing the absolute silence in the diner to deepen as everyone strained to hear. Command later said it was positioned specifically to catch first responders, a tactic the insurgents had perfected to maximize casualties among medics and rescue personnel. Emily saw it coming, that split second of recognition that comes from experience and training. And instead of diving for cover like any sane person would do, she threw her body over mine. He had to stop, swallowing hard against the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him even after 18 years. The blast should have killed us both instantly. Would have if she hadn't made herself a human shield, taking the shrapnel and debris and superheated gases into her own body to protect mine. By the time the quick reaction force arrived, she was unconscious. Her back and arms were a mess of burns and embedded metal that looked like something from a horror movie, except that this horror was real and it was chosen, and it was heroic beyond anything Hollywood could imagine. The silence in the diner had become a living thing broken only by the soft sound of someone crying. Perhaps the older woman, perhaps Emily herself, or maybe multiple people touched by the story of sacrifice laid bare before them. Daniel wasn't finished, though. He had 18 years of searching and gratitude to express, and Brian Cooper had provided the perfect opportunity to do so in a way that would leave no doubt about who deserved respect and who deserved contempt. 17, he said, the number hanging in the air like a verdict. That's the number you need to understand. 17 soldiers are breathing today, seeing their families living their lives because Emily Miller repeatedly chose others' lives over her own safety. 17 families didn't get folded flags and carefully worded condolence letters because she wouldn't leave anyone behind, even when doctrine said to preserve medical personnel for future casualties. Bronze Star for Valor, Daniel continued, his voice gaining strength again, building to a crescendo that would shatter whatever remained of Brian's self-justification. Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. Combat Medical Badge with a star denoting participation in ground combat. Meritorious Service Medal. And what did she ask for in return? Nothing. What recognition did she seek? None. She disappeared into civilian life, carrying those scars inside and out, working in this diner, serving coffee to people who called her a monster, who mocked her appearance, who threw money on the floor like she was beneath their contempt. He was moving now, pacing like a caged predator. His anger was building with each word until it filled the diner like a physical presence. And you, Brian Cooper of Branson Construction, dare you call her Freddy Krueger and question her service? You throw $2 on the floor and tell her to buy scar cream for wounds she received, saving lives that you aren't worthy to polish the boots of. The digital age had arrived in Mel's diner with a vengeance while Daniel spoke. Smartphones appeared like weapons drawn in defense of honor, their cameras capturing every word of his testimony and Brian's increasingly pale face as he realized the magnitude of his error. This is going viral, someone called out from the back, their voice filled with the excitement of witnessing justice in real time. 89,000 watching on my stream right now. It's spreading across platforms like wildfire. Another voice chimed in closer to Brian, and it was impossible to ignore. That's Branson Construction on his shirt. I just tagged their whole leadership team, their corporate account. And the interconnected world had made the diner's walls transparent, transforming a local incident into a globally witnessed moment of reckoning that would follow Brian Cooper for the rest of his life. Brian's phone began buzzing insistently, the screen lighting up with notification after notification in a cascade of digital doom. His face, already pale from Daniel's words, went ashen as he glimpsed the caller ID showing his boss's name. Then his supervisor, followed by numbers he didn't recognize, which were probably those of reporters or angry citizens who had found his information online. The phone continued to ring, accompanied by text message alerts and social media notifications, forming a symphony of impending consequences that grew louder with each passing second. "My boss," he whispered, the words barely audible over the electronic noise. "Oh God, my boss is calling." But the crowd that had formed between him and the exit wasn't interested in his suddenly urgent need to deal with the consequences of his actions, their faces reflecting the collective decision that he would face the music here in front of everyone in front of her, who was calling Brian's phone over and over again. The answer was becoming clear as comments flooded in on the live streams, spreading across the internet like digital wildfire. His employer, his colleagues, reporters from local news stations, veterans organizations, and soon everyone who mattered in his life would know exactly what kind of man he was. Hype karma. If you think Brian deserves what's coming next because the universe was about to deliver a lesson in respect that he would never forget, carved into his life with the permanence of Emily's scars. The manager of Mel's Diner, Bob Hutchinson, burst through the kitchen doors with the force of a man who had heard enough to understand that his establishment had become ground zero for something far beyond a simple customer dispute. A Vietnam veteran himself, though he rarely spoke of it beyond the faded Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm, Bob's expression reflected fury mixed with personal shame. He took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. Emily was standing exposed with her scars visible to all, tears still tracking down her face. Daniel was trembling with righteous anger, and Brian was desperately trying to silence his constantly ringing phone while the crowd blocked his escape. "What in the hell is going on in my diner?" Bob's voice carried the authority of someone who had given orders under fire, transforming his question into a demand for immediate answers. One of the live streaming customers thrust their phone toward him, showing him a replay of the confrontation that had already been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. Bob's expression darkened with each passing second, his jaw clenching as he watched his employee being humiliated and assaulted. "Brian Cooper," he responded, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Get out of my establishment now, and if I see you within 100 yards of here again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing and assault. Move." But Brian's path was blocked by customers who had formed a human barrier. Their faces reflected collective anger. "My phone," Brian stammered, looking at the screen where his boss's name flashed urgently. "I need to answer." The crowd wasn't interested in his excuse. "Answer it here," someone demanded. "Put it on speaker. Let's all hear what Branson Construction thinks." With shaking hands, Brian accepted the call and fumbled with the speaker button. His boss's voice exploded into the diner. "Morrison, what the kiss have you done? We've got thousands of messages flooding every channel. Our website has crashed and news vans are heading here right now. The owner called me personally. Do you understand? You're fired. Effective immediately. Security will box up your things. Don't come to the property. Please do not list us as a reference. And Morrison, you'd better pray that this doesn't escalate to legal action." The line went dead, leaving Brian standing there with the phone still pressed to his ear. His face drained of all color as the reality of his situation crashed down upon him like a collapsing building. Emily found her voice for the first time since the confrontation had shifted from cruelty to revelation. "I didn't want this," she replied, her words measured and careful. "I just wanted to serve coffee in peace, to live a quiet life where my past didn't define every interaction." She looked directly at Daniel and her voice softened with emotion. "I thought about you every single day. Every nightmare, every time I looked in the mirror. I thought about how I failed to save Rodriguez, how Thompson died despite everything I tried." Her voice broke on the names. "I'm sorry I couldn't save them all. I'm sorry I wasn't faster, stronger, better." Daniel crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his arms enveloping Emily in an embrace that spoke of shared trauma and complicated gratitude. "You saved who you could," he responded, his voice thick with emotion. "That's everything. I've searched for 18 years to say thank you, to tell you that my daughters exist because of you." They clung to each other while the diner erupted in spontaneous clapping. The sound builds from scattered claps to thunderous appreciation. Even Brian's crew members, abandoned by their leader, joined in the clapping, perhaps finally understanding the gravity of what they had witnessed. Bob Hutchinson waited for the clapping to die down before speaking again. "Emily, I owe you an apology. 3 years you've worked here, and I never knew, never asked. That's on me." He paused, visibly collecting himself. "Effective immediately, you're promoted to shift manager with a 30% raise, and you don't hide those scars anymore. Understood? Anyone who has a problem with them has a problem with me." He turned to address the entire diner. "This establishment honors those who serve. Always has, always will." The crowd parted to let Brian stumble toward the exit, his phone still buzzing with incoming calls and messages. As he reached the door, he turned back, perhaps to offer some defense, but the collective glare of the patrons killed whatever words he might have spoken. He fled into the morning sun, leaving only the echo of the bell. 6 months later, Mel's diner had been transformed in subtle but profound ways. Emily Miller stood behind the counter in her manager's uniform, the short sleeves revealing arms marked by scars she no longer felt compelled to hide. The wall behind the register featured a framed photo of Sergeant Emily Miller in full combat gear, alongside a placard reading "Our Hero," now joined by photos of other local veterans. The morning rush was in full swing when the bell chimed and a familiar figure entered. Brian Cooper stood in the doorway, but gone was the swagger that had once defined him. He approached slowly, aware of the suspicious glances from regular customers who recognized him. "I know I'm not welcome," Brian began, his voice subdued, "but I needed to deliver this personally." He placed an envelope on the counter with careful movements. "I lost everything after that day. My job, my wife, my home. Had to move back with my parents. But the worst part was realizing what kind of person I'd become." He gestured to the envelope. "I've been volunteering at the Veterans Center for 4 months. That's $5,000 from our fundraising efforts. It's not enough, but maybe it's a start." Emily noticed how different he looked from 6 months ago. The expensive gym-built muscles had softened into the leaner frame of someone who did actual physical labor. His designer clothes replaced by a simple work shirt, bearing volunteer badges from the Veterans Center. His hands, once manicured and soft, now bore calluses from painting walls and fixing wheelchairs, the kind of honest wear that came from service rather than self-indulgence. Several regular customers had tensed when he walked in, remembering that terrible morning, and old Harold from Table 3 had already half risen from his seat, ready to defend Emily again if needed. But something in Brian's demeanor, the way he kept his eyes down, the way his shoulders hunched as if carrying invisible weight, made them pause and watch instead of act. As Emily looked at him, she saw not the arrogant bully who had tormented her, but a broken man trying to piece himself back together, and she recognized that particular kind of brokenness because she'd lived with it for 18 years. The envelope in his hands trembled slightly, and she could see writing on the back, signatures and messages from other volunteers at the center. Veterans who had apparently decided that even someone like Brian deserved a chance at redemption if he was willing to work for it. "They made me earn the right to deliver this," Brian said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. 6 months of showing up every day, no excuses, no complaints. They said if I could do that, maybe I was serious about changing. Emily studied him for a long moment before picking up the envelope. She didn't open it, simply placed it in the drawer and met his eyes. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she replied quietly. "That's what service taught me. Sometimes you save people who wouldn't save you. Sometimes that's what makes us human." It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was something. Brian nodded, understanding this was more grace than he deserved. As he turned to leave, Emily called out, "Brian?" He paused, looking back. "The Veterans Center always needs volunteers.
Keep showing up."
The slightest smile touched her lips. "That's all any of us can do." He nodded again and left, the bell chiming softly behind him as he stepped into a future that might offer redemption if he was willing to work for it. But what happened when Brian showed up at the Veterans Center week after week? Should Emily forgive him completely? Let me know in the comments what you think about second chances and whether people can truly